Well, everyone, you didn't come here to see my face, so let me introduce Neil Ross.
Well, I came here to see your face. I'll say that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, it's great to have you on the channel, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
So it's never in my life would I expect. When I started this, it was just really to do the voice actor spotlight, to kind of find
Mhm.
my niche within the community
Right?
and the collecting community and those
Yeah.
people that won't let go of Transformers after over almost 40 years. And
Yeah.
but
Isn't it astonishing?
it is.
Yeah.
It is. And there's a great quote that you've mentioned a couple times. It's a quote from you that you've said in panels about Wally Burr and the fact that, he would be entitled to say that you get invited to conventions and you guys are remembered because of two shows being Transformers and G.I. Joes. And I thought that was extremely accurate. We did a great job, but you guys also are remembered because you're such a big part of our childhood.
Yeah. Well, there are other shows, but really the underpinning of most of this, I think, is Transformers and G.I. Joe. And he voice directed both of those shows. I get people are interested in Voltron, which I did more or less at the same time. And then
Yeah.
maybe a decade later, I was the Green Goblin in Spider-Man, and people reference that. But really, the core for me, of course, is Transformers and G.I. Joe. Sure.
Yeah, and it's a great core. I mean, it's basically we're going to keep talking about Transformers and G.I. Joe until everybody that saw the show is going to be gone. And then after that,
Mhm.
there's other shows. So I'm just going to do a quick run of the people in the chat. So we have my moderator for the day. No, not him. Not him either. Where is it? Oh, yeah, Ninja Bill. Thanks for moderating today. And I want to say hi to Chris, Lone Dragon. We have Fishy. Thanks for coming by. Oh, this is my sister watching at home with my parents.
Uh-huh.
Um, so my parents are really they kind of like seeing my face on camera, so they're proud. We have Transformer Talk Raw, The Void. Thanks for stopping by. We have my main man Kato. He's the reason I started this whole thing because he inspired me, and he's one of the reasons. So Kato's collection review. Thanks for coming by. And what he says here. Core part of my favorite memories, Transformer, G.I. Joe, and Spider-Man. That's right, he is a huge Spider-Man fan.
Mhm.
So, and then we have MC DJ, and for now, that's all I see. So, if I get maybe later, guys, I'll be able to access the chat to go through and check for a couple of questions, but and we'll see where things go off. So the first thing that we should, but I found very interesting, is that you were literally born under fire.
Well, yeah, kind of. It was the tail end of World War II. I was born in London, England. And during the time that I was in the womb, and roughly for the first year of my life, they were still lobbing V2 rockets into primarily London. And so, yes, my life could have been quite brief had one
Hey,
of those landed on the place we were living in, but fortunately that did not happen.
yeah, and then how many years were you in England?
Not long. I was 2 years old when we left. I have no actual memory of it. My
Okay,
earliest memories are, I think, Toronto, Canada, and then, of course, Montreal, where we eventually moved.
so so you bring up Montreal. Do you speak French? Have you ever?
No, no, we lived in a very English-speaking part of the city, and they did teach us French in school, but it was just 1 hour. And really, I think the only way that you can really learn a language is you have to speak it conversationally with other people, and there was really no one for me to do that with. So, la fenêtre, la porte, that's about it.
Yeah, you
And
get.
merci, and yeah.
See, I've learned English from watching cartoons because I was from up north Quebec, and like an 8 hour drive from Montreal, and
Ah,
I would watch. There was only two channels
yeah.
in English, and I learned from cartoons. At the time, mostly He-Man, Transformers, Thundercats,
Mhm.
and then I fell in love with my English teacher, and
Well, that helps.
Yeah, it did. It actually, I tried to impress that lady so hard, and it paid off. So, top of my class all the time. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, we only had, when I was a kid, there was only two channels in Montreal, TV channels, one in English, one in French. And they would
yeah.
more or less duplicate the programming. I remember there was a show about a French Canadian family called Le Family Plouf.
La
Probably
Famille Plouf.
wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. And the cast, I think they did it live. It didn't play at the same time, but essentially they'd get on and do a whole episode in English, and then they turn right around and do it in French. And same show, same gags, same everything. And I
That's
thought that.
must have been confusing for the actors. Well, not confusing. I guess it's a skill set.
Well, I think obviously the actors were all bilingual. And so maybe it wasn't as tough as I think it was, but to me, that's a little added layer of complication that most actors don't have to deal with. But they did that, and
But it's yeah. I'm surprised that you know the Famille Plouf. It's just
no, well,
something
that
that my dad used to tell me about, and he and my mom too. So,
it was a hugely popular show in Canada,
oh
both with
yeah,
English and French-speaking people. It was maybe similar to the English show I keep hearing about, EastEnders, which has gone on for years and years. Who
oh,
knows?
yeah. It's some show. Well, like Transformers, some show are just popular and they never die. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
because we still get online references to La Famille Plouf in Quebec. They make joke and memes and everything.
Hmm.
So never dies.
Peter Cullen is from Montreal as well.
I do, and
Yeah.
a lot of people are asking me if I'm going to get Peter Cullen and Frank Welker
Hmm.
on the show, but I understand that they're currently very busy and in extremely high demand. So, but
Yeah,
down the
rumor
road,
has it.
it's I want to as possible. Like Jack Angel, I would have loved to
Mhm.
interview. Very interesting man. Love his panels. So, but eventually I'm growing the channel, and eventually it's going to maybe I'll get other actors. But quite pleased with having you on the channel, having John Maceda about 2 weeks ago. So um, it's just something I never expected, and it's great. All right. So the one thing that you mentioned in the book is that you narrated episode of PBS about Werner von Braun,
Mhm.
who was a an important part of the NASA program, but also he's part of the reason why London got bombed.
Well, he was basically in charge of the V2 program. There were two kinds of bombs they sent from Germany. One was they were called the V1s and the V2s. At least that's what the English people called them. I don't know what the Germans called them. But V1 was sort of like a plane that would just come over, and it was timed to run out of fuel just as it got over London. And they were
Okay.
rather slow moving, and they were fairly easy to defend against. But the V2s were rockets,
Okay.
and it was like phew, boom, and very hard to defend against. And yeah, he was in charge of that program, and I got involved in narrating this. You mentioned the book.
Oh yes,
Here
that's
is
right.
the visual aid, and we can talk about the book some more or not.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's everybody in the chat get that book because it's a conversation. Basically, it's just Mr. Ross, sitting at home telling us a story of how he went through everything, and it's been a great help to prepare for this interview. So,
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm
I
glad.
know, definitely.
Well, so anyway, I'm suddenly find myself narrating an episode of Nova for public television, and it's not just about Werner von Braun. It's about the whole American space program. But
Okay.
basically, at the end of World War II, the Russians and the Americans ran in, and one of the many things they did was try to grab as many German scientists as they could and take them back to and one of the jokes around that time was the reason the American space program surpassed the Russian space program is our German scientists were smarter than their German scientists. So,
There you go.
but anyway, I just said to the producer offhandedly, I said, "This is very ironic. Here I am." There was a section about Werner von Braun, and I'm reading it, and I said, "Here I am lauding a man who essentially tried to kill me." Uh, But he was, to be
Yeah,
fair, he was trying to kill everybody in London.
exactly.
It wasn't personal.
No
So
favorites.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, that's a very dangerous start, but I've read in the book you mentioned a lot of your inspirations, early inspiration. Peter Sellers, which was one of my mom's favorite actor. We watch the I think it's the third movie where the chief inspector is kind of going nuts, and I never heard my mom laugh so hard, other than the Peter
Hmm.
Seller movie. So, but you also mentioned Peter Ustinov, Chuck Blore, Bill Balance, and then Otto Miller, who was your mentor.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, of course, some of those names will be familiar to folks and some won't. Peter Ustinov was a fantastically gifted man who acted, directed, composed, wrote, but he was wonderful at doing voices and accents, and he did an entire album which was all him. Every sound you hear on the album, vocally or sound effects, are him. And it's a satire of radio coverage of sports car races. It was
Okay.
called the Grand Prix du Rock. I think you can find it on YouTube. Put in
Yeah.
Peter Ustinov Grand Prix du Rock, and I'm sure something will come up.
Okay.
And I got a hold of a copy of that album, and I just listened to it compulsively over and over and over and over again. I don't know why I couldn't have explained why I did it. I just was so fascinated that this one man could have conversations with himself, essentially, play two different characters, and it was so believable. Uh, but then I would discover, if I was in the lunch court trying to punch up a dirty joke for my pals, and I thought a German accent would be helpful, suddenly I was able to do this, but I was not doing a German accent. I was doing Peter Ustinov doing a
Yes.
German accent. So he became essentially my first vocal coach. He just didn't know it. And then, of course, listening to Peter Sellers, who was at the time completely unknown, never done any of the movie stuff or any of it. He was
Hmm.
part of an English radio comedy show called The Goon Show. Goon has sort of negative connotations in this country, but it doesn't in England. It basically was the idiot show, if you like. And there were only three actors, and Ustinov played about 2/3 of the characters in the show. And I just was so, again, overwhelmed that it wasn't just that he was doing a voice. There was acting thrown in, which is something that you have to explain sometimes to people who aspire to do voiceovers in animation. It's
not just about coming up with a voice.
it's
You have
then
to
being
act,
able to act in that voice. And
which is one of the reason I started my channel is because there was a new show for the Transformers that Netflix produced about a year ago called War for Cybertron. And I have to say, and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody in that cast, but the voice acting was on some characters was absolutely terrible.
hmm,
And everybody was talking about it. So I decided to go back and show people what good voice acting was. And the one thing was that the voice, I'm not going to call him a voice actor, the impressionist they got to do
hmm,
Optimus Prime could do a very good Peter Cullen
mhm,
impression, but he couldn't act. So when it got intense, when it got more emotional, you didn't feel it, or it sounded like a bad impression of Batman from Christian Bale.
hmm.
So I think that's a key factor. You have to be an actor first, and then after that, that's why I know that from your book you signed up for every class and everything you could get your hands on to be able to, pierce in the business of voice acting after your radio time.
Right.
So, and
Because I was actually lacking in acting preparation. I thought I could do it, but
but we'll touch on that. But
yeah.
there's a great part of you that is self-driven, and I truly admire that. Otto Miller was one of your earlier mentor, people that showed you and gave you great advice.
Yes. Now that name will not be familiar to anybody, really, I suppose, at this point. But he was a local radio guy. I was living in San Diego, California at the time, And I was lucky enough to meet him, and lucky enough that he turned out to be a lovely man who was very encouraging at a time when I needed it, showed me things, explained things. I'm so grateful to him, because he could have just slammed the door in my face, but he didn't. And
Yeah.
so he really became my first mentor.
And
And
I think it's important in the business, like, to
yeah,
have, somebody that can teach you the ropes and teach you, a couple, like I did with, the people that, oh, there he is. That's another one of my inspiration to do this. Rodimus Primal. He's probably one of the most popular YouTubers for the Transformers community. And he showed me that it's okay to be a 40-year-old man collecting. So glad to have you here, man. It's always fun to see you. Oh, and we have Memo. Memo's my streaming partner. We do a lot together. Also Ninja Bill. So the
I
gang's
just
all
saw
there.
one of the comments that had to do with Lionel Stander,
Yeah.
and I could comment on that if you wanted.
Yes. Go ahead.
I did not help make him so great. He was already great without my help, but he was an astonishing. He was a character actor. He was older than Orson Welles when he did he did the Transformers movie.
Yeah.
Played the character of Cup. He was actually older than Orson Welles. He was so old. How old was he? He was so old that he had actually appeared in a silent movie when he was a teenager.
Okay.
And
That's a good reference.
he sort of looked like a bullfrog and sounded like one.
Yeah, he sounded like this.
I mean, with a name like Lionel Stander, you think you're going to meet somebody like Ronald Coleman, a very sophisticated Brit, but
Instead, you got this guy here.
and I don't think he'd ever done voiceovers before. And so what happened was we were lined up side by side. As I recall, there were four of us, and so you're facing the control room, but you can't see the other actors. And I realized almost immediately that it was important for Lionel to make contact with the other actors. I mean, that's how acting works. You feed
Yeah.
off each other. He would start to do a line, and then he would turn to look at somebody, and of course he would be off mic.
Yes.
And Wally Burr, who was directing, never looked at us. His head was always down at the storyboard. He almost never looked through the glass. So he didn't realize what the problem was, and he kept saying, "No, Lionel, you're off mic. I need you on mic." And I thought, this is going to go on all day. So I sort of peeked ahead in the script, and I realized I didn't have lines for a while.
Okay.
So I just ran around in front of Lionel and looked at him, and he looked at me, and he did his line. And then I'd scurry back to my microphone again and do my line, and I'd run around. And so I helped him in that fashion. But and Wally never realized this was going on. I told this story at a convention that I appeared at with Wally, and he said, "I'm absolutely astonished." He said, "I had no idea that was going on." I said, "Well, if you'd look up once in a while, Wally,
He's the one that you also gave a quick direction when Wally was asking for.
Oh, yeah. Lionel, it was so funny because we're in the green room just BSing, the other actors, and he could hear everything fine. He had hearing aids, but I mean, he picked up everything. But somehow when we got in the studio and Wally started directing, it's like he suddenly couldn't hear anything.
Okay.
So he had a line, I don't remember, the
Decepticons are coming.
something like that. And Wally said, "Oh, that's the idea, Lionel, but see, here's the situation." And then he went into this 4-minute explanation of what was going on in the scene.
Okay.
So you understand that, Lionel? All right, take two. And Lionel looks at me and he says,
"What did he say?"
And I said, he said, "Do it again louder."
The Decepticons are coming.
Perfect. Moving on.
That's great. That's see, that's the good. Oh, I just got a flash. Later, I'll need you to tell that Scatman's Cruthers story that you have.
Oh yeah. That was that was another good one.
Exactly. So it's worth mentioning. All right. So I just want to do a quick run of your journey in radio, and at the end, the stroke of luck of answering George Kennedy's phone call, and not George Kennedy, the famous one, just a guy you worked with.
Yeah.
So how did you get? From the book, I know how you got started in the radio business, but just for the viewers.
Yeah, well, in a nutshell, here I am, listening to Peter Ustinov records and screwing around with voices and accents, but I had no concept of making a living doing that. I mean, it just never even crossed my mind. And then I got interested in this new music they called rock and roll, and I began to become obsessed with it, which led to me listening to the radio a lot because that was really the only source for this music.
Mm-hmm.
And after a long time of listening to the radio and becoming a bit of a fan of some of the disc jockeys, it suddenly, one night, the light bulb went off across the top of my head, and I thought, I could do this. I could be a disc jockey. And once that idea occurred to me, it just became, it started as a little ember and turned into a raging forest fire. I absolutely had to be a disc jockey, and so that's what I did. But of course, there wasn't much of an outlet for the voices and the accents. Some DJs had done character voices. Some of them had sidekicks that was just them doing a tricky voice, but the business was changing. They didn't want that so much. And so I really didn't utilize that part of my, that arrow from my quiver. I just basically was a disc jockey production guy for 21 years. And I don't regret it. I had a hell of a lot of fun. I wish I had discovered voiceovers a little earlier, but, it worked out.
Yeah, which you discovered in the parking lot, right?
Yeah. The parking lot, which is no longer there, of KCBQ in San Diego, and chatting with a record promoter. And somehow or other in the conversation, he mentioned voiceovers. And I thought, scarcely daring to hope, what are voiceovers? And he said, oh, commercials, promos, cartoons, voiceover. I said, you mean you can make a living at it? Make a living? And he mentioned a couple of guys who were making a lot of money doing that. And he said, yeah, it's a whole thing. They have agents, and it's just, voiceovers. And I thought, I got to get in this business, because I was already beginning to be a bit soured by radio. But it was really tough to find things out in those days. I mean, now everybody knows about voiceovers, and I sometimes think everybody's in voiceovers. But back then, it was a very well-kept secret. Hardly anybody knew the business even existed. And there were just a relative handful of people doing it.
Yeah.
And I said, I have to be one of those people.
And it's a good thing that you did, because you had received an advice from one of your friend's mom that there's nothing sadder than a 40-year-old disc jockey.
Yeah, around the same time that I met Otto Miller, there was a guy I went to school with, and he said, well, my mom used to work in the radio business. I said, oh, would you introduce me? I mean, anybody that had even, set foot in a radio station, I wanted to talk to them. And she had worked in radio, not as a talent, but as a traffic person. That has to do with scheduling of commercials and keeping the logs and all of that sort of thing. But anyway, I met her, and she was a very nice lady, and she listened to all of my stupid questions. And when we got to the end, I said, well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And she said, all right, now I'm going to say something to you, and it won't mean anything right now, but I want you to remember this and act on it when the time comes. I said, no, yes, ma'am. And then she looked at me with this world-weary expression on her face and said, kid, there is nothing sadder than a 40-year-old disc jockey. And she was right. I didn't know what she was talking about at that point, but eventually I did.
And so did you notice that in people over 40, that kept doing radio, that there was something sad about them?
Yeah, there's a point. I mean, not, the successful folks who managed to, have long careers at particular stations and make nice money. They're not sad, but there's an awful lot of folks you run into who just didn't quite make it. And now they're getting into their middle age and they're still bouncing around in these smaller stations, getting
Mhm.
fired. And it's sometimes it's quite sad to witness that. And that would have been my fate, absolutely, if I had not transitioned into voiceovers. In fact, as I mentioned in the book, the day I left the last radio job I had, it suddenly hit me. Uh, my God, I'm 40 years old, and I
That's
remembered her words, and I thought, man, I got out just in time.
and it's so you don't think you would have, I don't know, break it like Casey Kasem, for instance.
Um, well, of course, Casey Kasem. It's interesting. I mean, American Top 40 was not really a disc jockey show. A disc jockey show is all ad libbed and happening in the moment. This was a scripted. Somebody
That's right.
wrote every word he said. I'm not putting him down. It was a voiceover job. It was his job to take what somebody wrote and interpret it. And he did a wonderful job of that, but he really wasn't a disc jockey. He was doing a voiceover gig when he did American Top 40.
That's interesting because I did one of my voice actor spotlight on him, and it never came up. That was never discussed. That it was more of a voiceover job, and that he did. I just figured it was just he wrote his own stuff, and
Well, he had been doing voiceovers. He was smart. He almost from the point that he hit Los Angeles, he started looking for voiceover work. And even the two guys who put together, or the three guys who put together with American Top 40, were so impressed with him and what he had done, even though he had never worked with them, that they offered him the job. He had this other gimmick, which they used in American Top 40, where before he was going into a commercial break, he would tease the next record he was going to play. And he would say something like,
Coming up next, we're going to play a record by a guy who was standing on a street corner in Philadelphia, and a car pulled up and a guy said, "Hey kid, how'd you like to be a star?" A year later, and we'll hear that artist after this.
well, you couldn't tune out. You had to stay around to see who the hell he was talking about.
exactly, that's a great gimmick. It
And
works.
people used to make fun of him at the hipper, slicker stations. Like, how corny is that? But if you think about it, that was a core part of American Top 40. The other thing was the statistics, which the guys who created the show said, everything's statistics. I mean, you watch a football game. Well, that was 10 yards. He's got an average of 3.9 on the free throws and blah, blah, blah. I'm not a sports fan, you can tell. But
Me either.
so Casey would do the stats on the records, how many copies they'd sold, what was the highest point they reached in the Billboard Hot 100, all of that. So it was basically statistics and anecdotes. And then, of course, dedications to pets who passed away. I don't know if you
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about the pets. It's a good gimmick will really, really work. So no, that's it's understandable. I mean, Casey was I didn't, for the longest time, I didn't want to do his voice actor spotlight because I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of Flynn Dilly, and I know there was a
Right.
big difference between them. But I decided to pull back from the judgment and the my personal opinion and just cover all the actors that I can. So
Yeah. No, I'm not even aware of that, and we don't need to go into it. But
oh no,
first I've heard of it.
yeah, it's just stuff that happens in the business, I guess. All right, so okay, a couple things. I want to compliment you on your ability to self-teach because, and it's just something that I've noticed from your book is that there's a lot of things that you learned by yourself. So is that something that you still have today?
Yeah, I really I never liked school. I don't know why. It's just sitting in a classroom with 30 other people my age and listening to somebody drone on does not
Mhm.
appeal to me. As I say in the book, I would have been much better in a time when they had apprentices. Somebody would have said, well, I'm going to apprentice you to the blacksmith.
Right.
And I would have done all the little grunt work, and little by little, he would have shown me how to do the job. And eventually I would be a blacksmith myself. And that's how I like to learn. but that's sort of tough to accomplish. But what it boils down to is that my father refused to go outside and teach me how to catch a ball, and I had to learn that. Otherwise, the kids wouldn't let me play with ball with them. And I figured out I could lob a tennis ball against a wall and have it come back as either a grounder or a pop fly. And I just basically taught myself how to catch a ball. And then when I wanted to get into radio, I sort of taught myself how to be a DJ, at least initially. I threw together a little studio in the garage and did these radio shows to nobody. I thought I was completely unique. And I've talked to so many other guys in the radio business who did exactly the same thing. One guy even figured out how to build a transmitter and actually was on the air regularly every night after he did his homework. And finally, the FCC showed up and said, "This is not acceptable, young man."
Yeah, exactly.
And took him off the air. But, you know,
I remember working in a corner store, and then somebody called me and said, "Hey, tune in on this station." And I tuned in. He's like, "Oh, that's me. I'm playing." But what he didn't realize that his little antenna was disrupting signals all around him.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, you know, not everybody should, but it's cool. I mean, back in those times to be able to have a, you know, a transmitter built by yourself and everything, that's pretty impressive. So, and then you had a good long career in radio. Then you went into voiceover again. You did a lot by yourself. You signed up for class. I know you signed up with Michael Bell's class on voice acting, or maybe it was not a class, but you know, a session. And I was going through your book, and I feel that you believed more in yourself than anybody else. And most people going through what you've been, or you know, I'm trying to remain, you know, polite, but the lack of support that was present in your life, most people would have given up, but you never did. So was that something that you taught yourself to be that dedicated, or it's just something that came naturally to keep believing, keep going?
I think it was because I had such a passion for these two things that I've done in my life, radio and then voiceovers. It was, I mentioned a Los Angeles writer named Charles Bukowski, who once wrote something that really smacked me upside of the head. He was asked by a college student, is writing a good profession to choose? And his answer is, "Young man, you don't choose writing. Writing chooses you." And then he told a very dramatic story about how he was about to commit suicide and suddenly noticed a newspaper and a stub of a pencil in the corner of the room. And instead of killing himself, he picked up this newspaper, and in the margins, he started to write, and he never stopped. And, you know, radio chose me at a certain point. I was talking to a relative, and she was bemoaning the fact that she knew my story, of course, and she says, "Nothing has ever chosen me." And I said, "I'm so sorry." And there isn't any way to make it happen for yourself. It's just suddenly you realize, I have to do this. And at that point, it doesn't matter what obstacles they throw up against you. I mean, I lost the first two radio jobs I had.
Yep.
I was fired, and they sat me down and said, "You have absolutely no future in this business, young man. You need to do something else." I didn't believe them, partly because I really didn't have any respect for them, but also I just had this belief I have to do this, and not a belief, a compulsion. And there's just no way I can not do this, and so I will just somehow work harder, and I will prevail.
Yeah, and you did. It's funny you bring back I had a friend who wanted to be in radio, and he had this little mixer, but he kept saying that, you know, he knew it was in him, but he never took the steps. You know, contrary to you, who actually took every step to do this. he got enrolled into the radio program in our local college, and he gave up halfway for whatever reason at the time. And I saw him 10 years later, and he was still telling me that he knows he had it in him. And I'm like, you were enrolled.
Yeah.
Where's that? So that, potentially would have been the case of a 40-year-old sad DJ.
Yeah.
So,
who's to say why he stopped? One thing I would say is that I've learned over the years, a lot of people I'm going to do this, but I'm waiting till I'm ready. A little more practice and then I'll be ready. And the truth is, you're never really ready. You get as prepared or ready as you can, and then you just got to dive in.
Yeah.
And hope you prevail. I mean, the first couple of jobs I had, they paid me. I should have paid them. I mean, it was an education. I was learning the radio business.
Yeah.
And
well, you did a class in New York when you were starting, and you were living in very limited accommodation, and then you had all those great I'm not gonna say, well, I guess gimmicks, but great place to get food at really low price. And
oh yeah, well there was a way to go. There was a chain of automats. They don't exist anymore. It was called Horn and Hardart in New York, and basically some of the bigger ones had steam tables, and it was like a buffet, but most of them, they had these little windows, and there's I don't know, a roll or something on a plate. You put a nickel in, and the window opens, and you get the roll, and you take it. So there was a way involving using ketchup and lemons that you stole from the tea section, and you could basically make yourself lemonade, tomato soup, and the only thing you paid for was the roll. That was 5 cents. But they were wise to this. If they caught you doing it, they'd throw you out.
Yeah.
But I did that a few times when I just didn't have any money to eat,
Yeah, it's I doing all the research I do for all the actors. Some people really went through a lot of hardship to be able to just survive and then eventually make it. There's a lot of veterans I find in acting, Paul Eiding and Wally Burr, and there was I think Michael Bell as well. It's been a while that I did my spotlight on him, but
he got drafted. He did 2 years.
Yeah. Well, you got drafted for.
Well, they tried, but I fooled them.
Yeah, with the help of George Kennedy, which I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So how lucky do you still think that was a massive stroke of luck?
Oh yes, my God! I mean, I couldn't believe it, but this is what happened. Essentially, I had the draft breathing down my neck. I guess everybody knows what the draft was. It's no longer happening, but back then they could grab you and stick you in the army for 2 years, and so I had the draft beating down on me, and the Vietnam War was going like gangbusters, and I had an ex-girlfriend who called me up. I don't know how she found out about it, but she said there's this Naval Reserve program where you can do a year of meetings and then 2 years of active duty, and then you're done. And I went ahead and signed up for that, and then I'm working at the radio station waiting for my year to end. And one Sunday night, the request line is blinking, and I didn't really want to pick it up, but something in my head said pick it up, and I did. And at the other end of the line was this guy named George Kennedy, who was a career Navy guy, but he had a radio background. And any time that he found himself stationed stateside, he would get a radio job. He'd done the morning show on a station in Los Angeles for a while. And we desperately needed good weekend people. So I set him up with a meeting with the program director, and they hired him. And he was very grateful for my help. And one day we're just chatting, and I said, "You're in the Navy? Is that what it is?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I guess I am too, kinda." He said, "What are you talking about?" And I explained my situation. And he said, "This is perfect." He said, "I'm in charge of the public affairs office at Sink Pack Fleet, Commander-in-Chief, United States Pacific Fleet. He says, I need a guy like you. We do a lot of stuff with audio and tape, and you're absolutely perfect. So basically, the captain he worked for had some connections in the Pentagon, and they greased the skids. And rather than bobbing about in the ocean in a boat, I spent the next 2 years at Pearl Harbor working in the public affairs office and working at night at the radio station. It's if you're going to be in the military, I mean, I had an apartment in town. It was like the Navy
Yeah,
was
that's right.
my
You weren't on
part-time
base.
job, you know.
So, but that was, I guess, great experience and also a big relief.
Yeah, well, if I hadn't picked that phone up that night, you know, I probably would have been on some aircraft carrier somewhere, you know.
Yeah. Or actually, well, do you think you would have, potentially seen combat or?
Well, part of the reason I opted for the Navy was this ex-girlfriend of mine said, you know, they're going to have to be really good shots to hit you 2 miles out at sea. And I said, oh, you got a point there. And some Navy people wound up on the patrol boats.
Yeah,
you've seen Apocalypse Now. That's
did.
what a lot of Navy guys ended up on those PBRs, and that was pretty hairy.
Yeah,
But,
well, wars, there's no winner in wars. That's
No,
my stance
no.
on it. But I respect anybody who serves. It's, yeah, just my thought. I just want to say hi to my girlfriend because she doesn't like the attention, but she comes in once in a while and says hi. So, hello, honey.
Hi, Catherine. Whoop. There we go.
There you go. All right. I just want to make sure we got enough time. Your journey into voiceover. You did Transformer, G.I. Joe, Voltron are the main ones, but you also did tons more, and I'm guessing you're still active today.
Yes, I get in there once in a while. Yeah, of course, when you say voiceover, it encompasses a lot of different skills.
Yes.
In a lot of different areas. It's interesting. Wally Burr pointed this out to me once. I hadn't realized. No, it wasn't Wally Burr. Excuse me. It was another chap.
Okay.
A guy named Bob Lloyd, who ran the Voicecaster, which was a business where they cast voices for commercials, and a lot of them were radio commercials. And he just offhandedly one day said, you know, radio isn't really voiceover. And I said, how can that be? And he said, well, what voiceover is short for is voice over picture. It's a movie term.
Okay.
And he said, you know, television commercial, sure, voice over picture. Movie, voice over picture. Cartoon show, voice over picture. Is it radio? Where's the picture? There is none. So technically it's not voiceovers, but everybody in voiceovers does radio commercials if they can, and as well as television commercials. Then you've got narrations, and obviously you've got animation. Then there are people that do voices in movies. You know, a character walks through a room, a radio is on, somebody's reading a newscast. Somebody has to do that. That's a voiceover. I've done that stuff. Probably the best known thing I've done is being the voice of the Biff Tannen Museum in Back to the Future 2.
Yes. And I rewatched the movie afterwards because I'm like, I just want to pick up, because I have to say, now that I do a lot of research and videos about you guys, the actors, I'm getting better at picking up, like, oh, he did the voice for this. Oh, okay, now I can recognize a couple of voices sometimes, depending how much you change it for the role.
Right.
But yes, you are in Back to the Future. That's, you know, it's even if it's a small part, you still, you know, you're part of this monumental franchise. So
I'm very grateful. It's wonderful to have that.
No,
if you're, you know, with voiceovers, nobody's a star. I mean, some stars do voiceovers, but generally, you know, us rank and file plain rap actors, as I call ourselves, none of us are stars really. And so if you're going to make a living, you got to make it on volume, and you have to be versatile. You have to be able to do animation. You have to be able to do commercials. You have to be able to do narrations. You run the gamut.
And that's one of my questions that I like to ask. Because I basically doing this, I've categorized people, you know, in the business in two categories. There's the working voice actor, like you, Corey Burton, Dan Gilvezan, and then there's the celebrity voice actor,
Mhm.
which they could cast you to do something, a lead role in a new Pixar animation, but instead they're gonna go get Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, is that a point of contempt in the voiceover community? The working actors, or is it something that's understood as, if we want movies to make successful and make more, we do have to get the publicity, and using those people are, that's the only way to do that? Or is it just, now we could do all of this ourselves?
Well, it was a slow process. When I first got in the business, celebrities wouldn't do voiceovers. It was, beneath them. Once in a while, somebody would do a commercial, but it was rare. And that began to change. And I had a pretty nice part in a feature film called An American Tale. But
Okay.
shortly after that, I think it was when Steven Spielberg did Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
Right.
and
Okay.
he used a lot of pretty well-known people, and suddenly it became
Mhm.
okay to do that kind of work for celebrities. And once that door was kicked open, and not just animation, commercials. Again, I think what turned the tide was when Gene Hackman, who was and is a highly respected actor,
Yeah.
started to do voiceovers, and it was like, well, if he's doing them, I guess it's okay to do it. Hey, call my agent, I'm available. And
Yeah. And then,
some people, it's interesting. Voice acting is a little different from on camera in ways subtle and not so subtle. If suddenly somebody wanted me to do on camera work, I wouldn't assume I could just walk on the set and do it. I would have to quickly find a coach and learn all kinds of stuff,
mhm.
and who knows if I would be successful at all. But the fact that you can be a successful on camera actor does not necessarily mean you will be a good voiceover actor in animation. Some people lock into it and they're wonderful, and other people just kind of phone it in because they don't really get it.
Yeah.
And but I mean, the ship has sailed. There's nothing we can do about it. When these big movies come out, if we get a chance to be the third guard from the left, we're thrilled, because all the
But I
major
find
parts
that
are already
extremely
cast.
sad. I
Well,
mean, you
you know.
guys built the business, starting maybe with, back with Roger Rabbit, well, not Roger Rabbit, but, Bugs Bunny, and then
Mhm.
Hanna-Barbera doing all those, shows, and it, with Dawes Butler and Don Messick, and then the 60s, 70s, you got these guys build the pillars of what is now voiceover. And then in the
Mhm.
80s, you guys picked up the mantle and kept going, and now I feel it's a cop out. And it's like, okay, well, now that Hollywood's run by accountants, we're gonna go get the most money, and then big names attract
Well, you
money.
can understand they want names for the marquee. The example it's not a movie, but the example I always use is the Simpsons. And arguably the two most popular characters in that are Bart and Homer.
Yes.
Well, if they were starting The Simpsons today, I guarantee you that Dan Castellaneta and Nancy Cartwright wouldn't get within a mile of the audition.
But
I
yeah,
mean, everybody knows who they are now, but back when they were cast in those roles, they were not famous people. If they did it
right.
today, they would start trying to cast celebrities. Now, maybe they would find a celebrity who would be a wonderful Bart. I don't know. But
But it's a good point. And
yeah,
I think,
yeah.
like with Family Guy, it started with maybe lesser known actors who are
Mhm,
now very known. But even then, Seth Green had a career already. Mila Kunis was very popular at
mhm,
the time.
yeah.
So, it's do you think that voiceover has it been, was it ever a cutthroat business, or was it more of a business of respect between the actors? And
No, I don't get out and about as much these days, but
Mhm.
no, it was never a cutthroat business. In fact, God, some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life, and so supportive of each other. And once in a while, in the early days, an on-camera person would wander into our world, and they would always be amazed. And they would say, in on camera, you go to an audition, everybody's glaring at everybody else, and they're trying to psych each other out. And he said, "You guys, it's like you're having a party. You're telling jokes." And, and I said, I don't know what it is. It's, these voiceover jobs, they're like buses. There's always another one coming along. I mean, if you get that bus, all right, cool, I'll get the next bus, and it just kind of has always been that way. One casting lady said to me once, "I think you people are the way you are because you're not judged on your looks." Maybe she was right. I don't know.
Wow.
There's a wonderful writer and director. He did Garfield and a bunch of other stuff. His name is Mark Evanier.
Okay.
And he said voiceover people are people who love acting more than they love wanting to be famous.
I can see that.
Like that. I'm paraphrasing, but I think maybe that's part of the key. We come to it not really from an ego standpoint, but more because it's fun.
Well, yeah. Well, it's the desire, and like I'm doing this YouTube thing for a year and a half now, and it's all about me having fun and trying to connect with other YouTubers and other collectors and voice actors, and it's just for my I'm not trying to make money off that, but eventually if it arrives and I get monetized by YouTube, sure, I'll take it. But it's just the love of I found out that I love video editing. And that's something I had never done. So that's the preparation I did. I bought a better phone for a camera. I bought a microphone and, just stuff to be able to do the job. But I didn't wait too long to be prepared, like you mentioned. I just dove in and then started. At first, I'm like, okay, my first video was Dan Gilvezan. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do research and I'm just going to talk about it. And then I realized, I need a script. So I wrote a script and then I did the voiceover and then I added the pictures and I had to learn all that. And I really enjoy it. So I just dove in. And it's one of the rare time I have to say that I'm actually just diving in something without being too afraid, because there was no risk. Worst comes to people don't watch and then, that's it. But I'm just doing it for my, I just broke 200 subscribers. And I never thought I'd get 10. So, it's all about.
Well, this is a wonderful time for, people who are sort of self-motivated because there's so much relatively inexpensive equipment available now.
Yes.
But back in the old days, you want to edit video, you got to have a whole editing bay with equipment that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. How the hell is some poor guy going to do that?
Yeah.
Now, I guess, you can do stuff on an iPhone.
Exactly. I have my Android and, I got a ring light so that I look good on camera and no makeup yet. But, it's part
It'll come. It'll come, I'm sure.
Well, I don't think I'll go that far. I just want a couple of things. You're one of the few actors from season 1 and 2. You did Slag, which is now the most recent version of Slag.
Oh.
A fantastic figure.
There he is, a fine-looking fellow.
And then you worked in the movie, and then you got to voice Springer.
Yes, indeed, I did.
Yeah, and he's
better things to do tonight than die.
There you go. So that's you're one of the few actors that work with the season 1 and 2 crew. Did the movie as a new character, right? And then continued into season 3 with a different crew. You weren't replaced, like Orson Welles and Leonard Nimoy and all those people that just came for the movie, and then after that were gone. Judd Nelson, and so was there any was it a different atmosphere from working with Peter Cullen and Dan Gilvezan and all those people, and then after that in season 3 working more with Dick Gautier and Jack Angel? And
no, not really. I mean, we all knew each other from other projects. I mean, Jack and Dick were not, strangers. We'd known them and worked with them before, so it was
Mhm.
just another day at the office.
And I think it's the fact that you guys did ensemble reads and everything. I was something that we don't see as much these days. Mr. Machida was telling me that it still happens to have ensemble read, but you don't all
Mhm.
record at the same time anymore. It's home studio recording and stuff like that. That's more
Well, of course, the
popular.
pandemic was a huge contributor to that.
Yes.
I think a lot of producers who would never have countenanced home studios suddenly realized, well, there's no alternative. We got to do this, and somehow they made it work. And
Yeah.
it just varies. It depends on what the producers want to do. I mean, you can do it from home. You can go to a studio. It's whatever, they're in charge. It's the way they want to do it. And I
Exactly.
always prefer to work with the other actors if possible. As I mentioned earlier, we feed off each other's energy, I mean, I can work solo, but I always think I'm just a little bit better if I've got the other actor or actors there.
Well, yeah, and you have the fact that you have, because I'm guessing if you're at home recording your lines, you don't have the whole script. So the situation, your perception of the situation could be a little different than.
Well, you do have the script.
Okay.
The thing that's really weird is games, because there is no storyline and you're just doing isolated lines. I guess you're reacting to the player, who doesn't even know he's going to play the game and won't be playing it for another 2 years. And so that requires a certain amount of imagination and concentration. When it comes to animation, you've got the full script, so you look at the line that's leading into your line and try to imagine how someone might read that, and then you react to that.
Yes, because you actually did a lot of games. One top of my head was you played in Baldur's Gate.
Hmm.
You played a thief named Eldot from and he's unfortunately that guy, the way they set him up, he's like in chapter 4, so you
Mm.
don't get to spend a whole lot of time with him, and I thought that was pretty sad, because he's a fun character. And it's very different to record for games because they give you your lines, and it's a very a well kept secret, because stuff will come up 2-3 years later.
Hmm.
Is
Well,
there
you'll
is there
talk to the director. You'll say, "Why am I saying this?" And they go, "Well, I don't really know. Do the best you can."
wow, okay, so there's not another Wally Burr in there where that he knew everything for the show, and he
I
did
don't
his
know if
own
Wally
work.
ever directed a game. That might have been his nemesis,
Yeah.
with no
Oh yeah, it would have been
storyline. I don't know.
very different. So all right, so we're almost we're at the hour mark, so I don't think I'll be able to take questions for maybe one. Adam, hey Adam, what influence did you draw on for Springer as more a veteran Transformer, but only introduced in the movie, especially after starting in the earlier series?
Well, actually, I had been doing Springer for the television show. There's a long lag time between the time you record and the time the thing actually hits the air, because the voiceover is the first thing that happens, other than somebody writing the script, obviously.
Oh,
And then the animation happens much later.
so you
So
shot season 3 before the movie.
I believe so. I remember that I
Okay.
had done the Springer voice several times in television episodes, and then the movie
Okay.
came along.
That
What
makes
they
sense.
were doing primarily was, using these movie stars in the movie, and then when the television show started up again, they would replace them with the Dick Gautiers and the Jack Angels,
Yeah,
et cetera,
exactly.
et cetera. And why they didn't cast a celebrity as Springer for the movie, I don't know. The part was big enough to where I think they could have offered it to a celebrity, and for some reason or other, they didn't. So I'm very grateful for that. I got to play that
Yeah,
part in the movie. That was
it's
wonderful.
yeah, and
What is my influence? I don't know. It's Pat Fraley calls it my butch, well-hung voice. You know, it's down in here, tough guy.
Well,
I'm ready to do anything, this kind of thing.
while doing my research, I did notice that a couple of people mentioned that you have a very unique accent because of you had a British mother and then you lived in Canada and then you moved to LA. So does that play a factor in getting roles sometimes because they're looking for something specific and they know you can pull it off?
Well, I used to get a lot of work because they knew I could do accents.
Okay.
You know, I would be brought in to do a one-off character in an episode who's the owner of a Greek restaurant or something like that. And yeah, those of us who could do accents, obviously, well, it was just another arrow in our quiver. Let me put it that way. But
Okay.
as far as the way I speak now, God only knows. My mother tells me I was speaking at the age of 2 and had a lovely British accent, and you've lost it. So, well, trying to fit in here in Canada, Ma. You know, not too many little Lord Fauntleroys running around that I can pal up with. And then we leave Canada and go to California. And nobody ever made fun of the way I spoke, so I must not have said oot and a boot.
Or you picked up the local accent and were able to instinctively
I guess maybe that's what I
replicate it.
did. I don't know. The only time anybody's ever made fun of me was when I was in New York. I was hanging around with some guys in Central Park. And I mentioned that I was from California, and one of them says,
You're from California, huh? I knew you was from someplace because you talk funny.
See, I can do accents. I can try, but it's not my forte. So,
well, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's somebody once asked me, "Can you teach me to do accents? Can you teach?" And I guess it can be taught. There are coaches who can have had some success with that, but it just seems to be an innate thing. My mother was a quite successful actress at one point. Couldn't do an accent to save her life. I'm so tired of everyone asking me where I'm from. I'm going to speak like an American now, and you should hear what came out of her mouth next. I'd say, Ma, don't even try. Just, you know.
But did she keep acting and working once she moved out of Britain? Or?
No. Her career basically ended shortly after I was born. And,
okay.
That was it.
All right. So I'm pretty. Oh no! I just want to know if there's any projects that you're currently working on that we can know about, or
yeah, as I'm sure you know, that there's a lot of people wanting us to sign non-disclosure agreements. So I'm terrified to talk about almost anything. But I do have. I'm the announcer on a network game show called Press Your Luck, which is returning to ABC on, I believe it's the 7th of July.
Okay.
So you hear me on there as the announcer.
And also the voice of the whammy.
Which is really sped up and could be anybody, actually, but it is me. So you might want to take a look at that. Other than that, I really can't talk about anything. Because, I'll blurt something out and then they'll have my house.
Okay.
And I need my house.
No, I understand the whole non-disclosure stuff. So, well, thank you very much for coming over my channel and having this conversation with me and answering my questions. Sorry, people in the chat. These things can take a while, so I didn't get to ask pull that many questions. And but I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it.
And, I have, and let me just beg your indulgence, Donald, if I can just.
Yep, go ahead.
Should anybody be interested, this is a book that I wrote about my life, my radio career, the voiceover adventures, lots of anecdotes about Transformers, G.I.Joe, Voltron, etc., etc. It's available on Amazon. There is an audio version available at Audible. And there is a website devoted to the book where you can learn more about it. And there are links to purchase it. And that's cleverly called www.neilbook.com. End of infomercial.
There you go. All right. Well, I'm going to run with the outro. And, I'm trying to be professional and everything. So thanks for coming by, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Also, leave a comment. I love reading those. And remember, nothing in life gives you a right to be an asshole. Take care.